Okay, so today we're going to get into graphing inequalities, interval notation, and then some solving inequalities. So that's just a little overview for what we have for this video. Let's begin with graphing inequalities. So for graphing inequalities, we're going to use a closed dot for greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. So these two signs right here, they simply mean greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. Now, here's the way that I choose to remember them. So you're going to read these left to right just like you would read a sentence. So when you look at less than, you have a point here, which is 1 point for the left side, and you have a point, 2 points here, which is 2 points for the right side. So that means that 1 is less than 2. That's how I choose to remember it. I just like remembering it that way because that's the best way for me to remember it. Then the opposite is true for left to right, reading it like you're reading a sentence. 2 dots here for greater than, 1 point here, so 2 is greater than 1, so that's going to be greater. And then when it has, I don't know what's going on here, when it has the lines under it, that just means greater than or equal to. So it means less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. Anytime it has a line under it and you graph it, it's going to be a solid line like this. Okay, that's a closed point. That's a closed dot. That's what we're going to use for anything that's greater than or equal to or less than or equal to. We're going to use an open dot for less than or greater than. So if there's no line under it, you're going to use an open dot just like that. So that's the 2 big points for graphing inequalities. So let's look at some interval notation. So interval notation is just a way to write the solution to an equality or inequality. And we're going to use infinity symbols, parentheses, or brackets. Now, you use a parentheses anytime it's open. So anytime that there's not a line under it, so if we just have greater than or less than, you're going to use parentheses for these. Okay? And the same is going to be true with the brackets for closed. So brackets and closed are together. So anytime you see a greater than or equal to or less than or equal to, you're going to use brackets. And that just means it's included in that. It means it's just closed on that interval. So let's look at 1 and 2. So right here we have x greater than or equal to 8. So that means we're going to start with 8 in the middle. We're going to go up with 9, 10. Then we're going to go down 7, 6. That means this tells us that it's closed. So we're going to use a closed point above 8. It's supposed to be closed. And then if it's greater than, a way I like to remember this is if you have your variable on the left, which it always, that's the best way to set these up is to have the variable on the left, integers on the right. If you notice, this almost looks like a little arrow. So it's basically saying point your line this way. That's another easy way to remember it. Or you could just remember x is greater than or equal to 8. So that means everything greater than 8 is included. So we're going to have to go 8 and draw our arrow greater than 8. Then our interval notation would be this. We know that we're going to use brackets because it's closed, because of the line under the inequality symbol. Now, since 8 if we look at our graph here, it starts at 8, so that's where we're going to start. If we're reading left to right like a sentence, you read the graph the same way. So if you start from left to right, you end up coming to the 8 first. So that's going to be our first number we put. Then we're going to need everything greater than that up to infinity. So it's just going to be 8 to infinity, just like that. And I'll erase this so that you can actually see that. So that would be our answer. That's how it would look in interval notation. Now, let's look at number 2. So number 2, we know we've got -1 here in the middle. So we're going to go up from that. So it's going to be 0, 1, -2, -3. All right. So now this is A is less than -1. So we don't have an less than or equal to sign. So we know since there's no line under it, it's going to be open. It's going to be an open point. So we're going to make our open point above -1. Now, this is everything less than -1. Or you could say, oh, that looks like a little arrow pointing that way. So everything less than -1 is what we want. So that's where we want our arrow to point. Okay? Now, when we write this, it's going to be a tad bit different. So I'm going to get rid of, well, I didn't want to do that. Don't know what just happened. I'm going to get rid of this so you can see. Since it's an open point, we're going to use parentheses. Now, reading left to right, like we were reading a sentence, when we read left to right, we're starting somewhere over here. And that goes everything less than -1 all the way to -infinity. So we're going to start with -infinity there. That's going to be our first one, or our first coordinate. Then we're going to add in our -1 because it goes all the way up to this -1 and then it stops. It doesn't go any further than that. All right. Now, that is the graphing. That's what you need to know for the graphing of inequalities. So, solving inequalities. They follow the same rules as an inequality does. Same rules to solve an inequality as it does with an equation. So we're going to solve these the exact same way. The only difference is you're going to have an inequality symbol like that instead of an equal sign. But you can use them, think of them the same way except this one rule. This is the one thing you have to remember. Is that you switch the inequality symbol if you multiply or divide by a negative number. So when you're solving these, if you ever multiply or divide by a negative number, if you had a greater than sign, it now becomes a less than sign, and vice versa. So let's do a few examples. So let's start off with number 3. So we've got number 3 here. It says solve, graph, and write the solution to each inequality in interval notation. So the first thing we're going to do it just like we'd solve in equation. We're going to combine like terms to begin with. Since we don't distribute here, so there's nowhere to distribute here, so we're going to combine like terms. So what I like to do is I like to draw me this little line here just to separate the two. Here's what I would begin doing first. I would take, because we know we have to get a v on this side, we have to get a v on one side, we have to get integers on the other side, so we have to isolate our variable. So I'm going to take away 7v because this is a plus 7v, and I need to do the opposite of what's going on. So I'm going to subtract that from both sides. It's going to leave me with negative 2v plus 1 greater than negative 17, because that minus 17 still stays there. Okay. Now, draw my line again. I'm going to want to continue with my isolation of this variable by getting rid of this little plus 1 here. We don't need that anymore. We need that to be gone. So we're going to do the opposite of whatever's happening here. So this is plus 1. So we're going to do minus 1 to both sides. So our negative 2v comes down. That's gone. We still have our greater than symbol. That's going to be minus 18. Now, our last step is to get rid of this negative 2 from the v. And the way we do that is, we said before, this is negative 2 times v. So we're going to divide by negative 2 because we need to do the opposite of whatever's happening there. So that's going to get rid of that. What we do to one side, we do to the other. So now this is going to be, this is going to end up giving us v. And you'll notice, what did we do here? We divided by a negative number. And we remember I said, if you divide by a negative number, this has to flip. So now it's v. It was greater than, now it's less than positive 9. And that is our answer. So write that down real quick. Pause the video. Write that down because I'm going to erase it so that I can graph it. So we want to graph this. So we're going to start out at 9. And if you look at the beginning, it was just a greater than sign, not a greater than or equal to. So it's going to be an open. Okay. So this means that we're going to start there with our open interval, and then we need everything less than 9. So everything to the left of 9 is what we want. We want our arrow to be going less than 9, not above 9. And then, so that's our graph. We know that since it's an open interval that we're going to use parentheses. If we're reading right to left, we won't hit 9 first. We'll hit all the negative numbers first, or all the numbers less than 9. So we're going to use down to negative infinity to 9. And that will be our scientific notation of that. Let's see. Let's look at one harder example, and then we will do set notation, and that will be it. So let's look at 10. So if we look at 10, first thing we have to do is we have to distribute this. We have to distribute both sides. So that's going to be negative 6p minus 24 less than negative 8p minus 24. All right. So our next step is going to be isolate the variable. So we need to move this. We need to manipulate this equation. We need to get our p's on the left, and we need numbers on the right. So we're going to add 8p to both sides. Now that's going to give us negative 2p minus 24 less than negative 24. Now we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to get the numbers on the right side. So plus 24 plus 24. That's going to give us negative 2p less than, now that becomes 0. But that doesn't affect us in any way right now, because all that means is that this p is going to end up being less than 0. So if we continue to do this, we have to continue. Actually, this was not a negative. This was a positive. This was a positive 2. Okay, so we're going to divide by our positive 2 to get p by itself. So our final answer is going to be p minus 0. So that means p is going to be everything less than 0, and it's not less than or equal to. So now the next step is going to be the graphing. Pause this and write this down so you can get all of this. All right, now the graphing part. We know it's an open interval because it doesn't have a line under the inequality symbol. We want everything less than 0, so our graph starts at 0. We want everything less than 0, so that means we're going to go to the left. We want our arrow to go to everything to the left. Now, we know we're going to use parentheses because it's an open interval. Since it's less than, we're going to start at negative infinity, go up to 0, and that would be the interval notation. All right, so that is it for that. And then just for set notation, this is just added on. So set notation is going to look like this. So x is greater than 5. Here's how you would write this. So it's a little bracket there, x such that x greater than 5. That's all that means. That means for all of these x's, x is going to be greater than 5. So you can read that as x values, so all x values greater than 5. And that is it for this video. Just remember to watch for your open and closed intervals, your parentheses and brackets, and watch your signs as always. And that is it.